finding is, oh, sorry about that. Wow, that was wild. So what I've found that like with Albarino is with a lot more Albarino coming to the United States market, there's a real mixed bag of different options out there. There's a lot of these entry level options that are made, I think, without like a lot of integrity and thoughtfulness. They're just kind of there. They're fun. There's nothing really super complex about them. And then there's a wine like what we're about to experience here, the Lirana, which I think is made with a really thoughtful mindset when it comes to Albarino, and really has a beautiful balance of acidity and texture, and also really represents the fact that this is a seaside wine region. So Rias Baixas is right in the northwestern corner of Spain. You can see in your inserts, you have little stars to where each wine is located. And Rias Baixas is just going to be north of Portugal, right on the Atlantic coast. And the name actually translates Rias Baixas to the Lower Rias, or it basically represents the 4 estuaries that are part of the Rias Baixas region that dump out this, beautiful water into the salt water of the Atlantic. So it's definitely a big part of the terroir there. And then you have 5 different subregions within Rias Baixas, though the region that we're speaking about tonight, which is Val de Salnes, is definitely the most well-known of the 5 and actually has the most amount of Albarino produced out of all of them. Another exciting thing to note about Rias Baixas is the majority of wine production there is white wine production. About 99% of all wines produced in Rias Baixas is going to be white wine production. And it kind of makes sense too, because we're getting into some of these cooler climate pockets. As you typically get to some of these cooler regions, you'll find that there's a lot more white grapes planted than red. And even if you just went down to the south to Portugal, it's going to be where the Minho region is, where a lot of the Vinho Verde wines are produced, which also features the Albarino grape varietal, which is known there as Alvarinho. So definitely mostly white wine production, though there is a very small amount of red in Rias Baixas, and the majority of white wine production is home to Albarino, about 90%. There's another grape varietal that grows in Rias Baixas as well called Loureiro, which is also used in a lot of blends in northern Portugal as well, but it's definitely not as quality as Albarino in my opinion. So you might wonder what to expect when you're drinking Albarino. In terms of like higher quality offerings, what I always love about the Albarino varietal is since it's grown so close to the seaside, you get this beautiful, vibrant acidity and great minerality that comes through. But also I love like maybe growing up next to the water, it just excites me very much. But I love just that kind of almost like bit of salinity that can like come through in the wines, which just is so reminiscent of the seaside and the coast. While there can be a variety of different aromatic properties for Albarino, definitely some of the most classic would be more of that like white peach, or sometimes even like kind of peach pit, apricot, sometimes like either apple or quince, and sometimes melon and pineapple. But when I say pineapple, think more like that like tart pineapple, since this is a cooler climate area, not as much like tropical. And the acidity is high, and this is a grape that has, as a like a berry, has thicker skin, so you can get sometimes like a higher phenolic content here, which gives you a little more bitterness. If you've had Vermentino before from Italy, can be quite similar in terms of this like little bit of bitterness that comes through. So we'll taste it together and talk about it. So basically, as things are getting warmer, it's heating up here in Boston. I think it's about to be 90 degrees tomorrow. This is like an ideal coiffer for me, just in terms of something that's going to be light, fresh, but at the same time has like texture and integrity to it. So on the nose here, I'm definitely getting more of that kind of like zippy lemon, that pineapple, a little bit of that like appley quince. And if you look too, even at the wine, the sun's starting to set down, so I don't have the ideal lighting here, but you can see too, in terms of the color, this just beautiful kind of straw color with hints of like very small hints of yellow, and like even sometimes some hints of green here, which can sometimes be a little bit more indicative of this being from a cooler climate area. Ooh, when I'm tasting the wine, The acidity just hits you right away, but in the most pleasant and uplifting way that just makes me salivate and want to eat great food. And the minerality too just really just explodes in your mouth. And the finish here is pretty long. I was really impressed. So Forjas de Salnas actually makes a couple single vineyard expressions. This is their like entry level wine. And I think for an entry level Albarino, this is exquisite. It's just beautiful. And it showcases, I think, like the depth and texture that Albarino can have. But it's interesting. So I had actually put in your tasting notes that there is, I think, 80% stainless steel and 20% Foudre. But on the back of the label here, it says there's no oak aging. I don't know if anybody noticed that. I've been told that they're using a small percentage of Foudre, which is like an old oak barrel. It's basically been used so many times that it's not supposed to impart any oak flavor, but it's there to give texture, because a lot of producers sometimes in Ria Spicious are using malolactic fermentation in the winemaking process to kind of add texture. Once again, malolactic fermentation is going to basically tone down some of the acidity and bring forth a little more texture, more a line of that like lactic acid, that same acid that's in like cream or milk. But Rodrigo is not a fan of that, and he wants to use a more natural method to enhance the texture, as things can be very zippy in this area of the world with the climate being so cool. So he actually lets the grapes hang on the vine much longer than his neighbors, so he can develop a little bit more ripeness and add a little more texture here, but still like keep the integrity of the acidity. So I guess it's something that not a lot of people do because it is tricky to do it right. So really showcases, I think, the real talent here of the winemaker, which is amazing. I'd love to get some like thoughts, feedback on this wine so far, just like any questions, as I could talk away about this wine all day because I love it.
Well, I'll love it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I love this. I mean, it's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon here near Seattle, but what a great wine. The aroma hit me right away. I just loved it. And it's almost like, you know, I'm really ready to start drinking it in the afternoon. I'm interested, though, in the 20% you mentioned. I was going to ask about this 80% stainless and the Nutrifondra 20%. What exactly is that again?
It's just an oak barrel that's been used like several times, so that it's not meant to impart like oak flavor, but it's going to basically be able to add a little texture to the wine. And sometimes it can like have a very small amount of like tannin that can come through from the wood. But overall, they're just to like enhance the texture a little bit without adding the secondary flavors and aromas of oak.
Okay, great. Yeah, the stainless really comes through, and the fruit, you know, the fruitiness, the lemony flavor just hits you right in the beginning. It's really wonderful.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely like, for me, there's a category of white wine that like I put in the energizing category. It just like literally like lifts your spirits and gets you ready to like start off the night or maybe the day, whatever you feel. But it's just one of those wines that just feels very uplifting. And I remember when I first like got into the wine business, Spanish white wines were really what like got me into white wines, because I was more of a red wine drinker. And I feel like this is like the ideal, you know, Spanish white. When I think about it, it's just like that, like it feels like it starts the party, but at the same time, this has like, you know, some complexity to it, and it's interesting, and it's contemplative, but it's still fun and playful at the same time. And I love that. So I'm glad you enjoyed it too. Any other like thoughts, feedback?
I got a question, Chelsea. There's got to be some pretty strong lees contact on this, I would imagine. Like
Yeah,
you can get it on the nose, kind of like feel like you're getting that, you know, this the other guest, or maybe you mentioned the lemon cream on it, because
yeah,
I mean, this is kind of surprisingly like, listen, I'm not like by any means like a great blind taster, but I can mistake this for white Burgundy easily.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The lees and like the lemon and, you know, kind of that you would get on it. So because you can definitely tell this guy lets it get a little bit riper, you know, for sure. On it, though, the alcohol definitely doesn't seem high, you know, but
yeah, this is the cool subclimate, which is interesting, of Ria Spicious. And Ria Spicious is known for being cooler overall, a lot of rain too. So it's like easy, once again, to take on those higher levels of acidity. And you'll find that a lot of the vines too are grown in like a pergola style so that they can be above ground, just so that they don't get too wet. So there's not a lot of issues with disease.
Molly and I were there
Cool.
in March of 2019. So we drove from Barcelona all the way to Rio Spatius. So we we hit like all the way down to the Orosal region.
Stopped in Rioja. Yeah, it was epic. We ate.
Yeah, you love your life. Did you try the octopus, the pulpo gallego?
Oh, yeah, we ate a lot of octopus, like lunch and dinner every day.
I'm not gonna lie.
We import some Spanish wine in the company that I work for. So, you know, I was lucky to spend a lot of time. I had a second trip over there not too long after that. So
did you guys have a producer from Rio Spatius that you visited?
Yeah, Terra Scouta. They're in the Orosal, so they're more on the border of Portugal. A little bit different kind of soil and stuff, and they use Little Luero in some of their wines, but they own a lot of Cano Blanco.
Oh, cool.
Too. So, but this is it, and that the wine that we bring in is very different. That's what I was saying. Like this is it's very impressive. This is like really high quality. You know, there's a lot of co-ops over there, but this is way above that. You know?
It's interesting. I found that like there's a lot of other Spanish, or a lot of other Albarinos or Spanish Albarinos that like tend to be a little more fleshy. They offer like the fruit's a little more voluptuous. This is like a little more like high tone. And definitely I can see what you're saying with those white Burgundy vibes, maybe especially like Chablisienne kind of feeling.
Yeah, or like a Macon maybe.
Yeah.
Just it's, you know, you still can get that white peach kind of that you get on this with a little creaminess that you still get on this, like on a white Burgundy. So I mean, it's this is very good. It's very impressive. It's different than a lot of stuff I've had. You know.
Oh, I'm so glad you guys, and I'm so excited. I want to hear about your trip. That's amazing. So it's so interesting. Well, it's so funny because when I made the recommendation in everybody's insert about the octopus recommendation, I must say it like broke my heart a little bit because I just watched My Octopus Teacher. I don't know if anybody has seen that.
I'm dying to watch it, but yeah.
If anybody hasn't, I recommend it. It's amazing, but it made me a little sad about recommending the octopus. But for those who do not want to have octopus, I mean, definitely this is like seafood central. So, I mean, it would be ideal at least doing a shellfish of some sort here. But for those like vegetarians too, I think there's like a lot of like green-based vegetable dishes you could do here, like especially like grilled, like green veggies, squashes, zucchinis, fun things like that. I think would be super yummy. But yeah, it's a fun, well-made wine, and it just kind of showcases the fact that this grape can be a rock star and is one of the best quality grape varietals of Spain. I think shown in a beautiful light. Wayne, did you have something you wanted to say? Did we?
I did. Two things. Number one, you hear a lot of times when a wine and the flavor profile includes honeysuckle.
Yeah.
For me, this wine is what they're talking about. The honeysuckle I get is just, that's my first flavor. And secondary for me is the lemon. And the lemon is more like the lemon filling in a donut rather than like a lemon. And it's really interesting to separate those lemony flavors when you think about it and when you remember what a lemon filled donut tastes like.
Yeah.
That's fun. That's the fun part for me in tasting, just remembering those old flavors that, I haven't had a lemon donut in probably 20 years, but that was the first thing that I thought of when I tasted that lemon. But the honeysuckle jumped out at me, and that's something that you don't usually see. And I'm wondering if you think that is because they leave it on the vine so long, it gets a little bit of more of that honeysuckle flavor from hang time.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be hang time 100%. It's funny because I didn't initially get the honeysuckle as much. When I initially opened it, and it came through a little bit more for me, like as I was kind of tasting through and letting it sit. I also had mine maybe a little too cold too upon initial opening. So as I've kind of let it sit and enjoy, it comes through. But it's interesting here because there are definitely some flavors here which are a little more ripe than I would like imagine, but they're still counteracted by like this just super beautiful acidity that just like cuts it through really nicely. So it's a beautiful harmony for sure. And I love that you had that experience. Any other thoughts, questions, feelings before we move on?
Yeah, I was just gonna say for a wine that was made in a ripe style, I just feel like I'm surprised, I'm taken aback by how it has also some soft and delicate qualities. I'm definitely getting like white flowers and honeydew, and it's just like so soothing while also being so sharp with the high acid from the underripe stone fruit. I'm just like, I'm loving it. I think it's beautifully balanced.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, it's honestly just a real joy. And it's funny. So I like definitely always like, you know, I'm a real like Northern Italian wine lover. It's sometimes like always where my heart always tends to take me. But I just like, I loved getting to revisit some of these wines because it just like made me just really remember just how much I love, especially some of these amazing Spanish whites, but just the Spanish reds too. And just as we get through, we can talk about it. But it's just exciting when you kind of you get reintroduced to something, and it's a wonderful feeling. So I'm glad you feel the same way. Awesome. Cool. Well, any other questions before we move on to the next wine? Awesome. Okay. We're going to go somewhere a little obscure for our second wine. So we have the 2017 Vara e Polgar, which is 100% Tintilla, which is coming from the Vino de la Tierra de Cadiz. So we're going to southwestern Spain, right around Jerez, which is, of course, known for sherry production. And this is kind of one of those interesting wines that I think really showcases Alberto Orte's like talents as a winemaker and just like his overall philosophy. As I mentioned, he's a partner with Patrick Mata in this project with Ole Obrigrado. And what's really interesting is like Alberto really likes to focus on some of these areas with some of these forgotten grape varietals and like also repurposing some of these vineyards that have kind of died off over the years. So this is a perfect example as it's a grape varietal Tintilla, which was known for being planted in Jerez for a long period of time, but it almost died off due to the phylloxera epidemic, the late kind of 19th, early 20th century. And there were very few kind of cuttings still available. So Alberto was able to find some of the cuttings and like able to establish his own vineyard. He actually, for the other two projects that we'll talk about afterwards, the Portela and the La Antigua Classico, those are vineyards that he works with growers for, but this is actually like winery that or vineyard that he owns. And it's interesting because he actually grew up and now lives in the area of Jerez in the town of Cadiz. And it's a little seaside town that's kind of the entryway to sherry country. So this is, of course, not a fortified wine. It's a still red wine coming from Tintilla. And once again, a grape varietal that was relatively underutilized for a long period of time due to it really not being available. It's also known in Spain, or sorry, in Rioja as Graciano, which is usually about a third or fourth tier like blending varietal in Rioja that we'll actually get to experience too with our last wine. And it wasn't until recently that they realized the connection between Tintilla and Graciano. It's really interesting how like you're always finding these grape varietals that they actually find that there is a connection between one or the other. And so I always find that to be a really interesting part of winemaking and just like winemaking history, I guess. But definitely Alberto is one of those winemakers who's really passionate about making these connections and doing what he can to kind of repurpose some of these ancient varietals. So we're going to soils now that are called Alberiza soils, which are also the same soils that are very chalky soils that you can find strewn all throughout the Champagne region of France. They bring you wines of like real incredible freshness. And also you might be wondering too, the title of this wine, Vara e Polgar, is actually in reference to the stick and thumb is what it means, the translation. It actually translates to the method of pruning that they use with the grapes. They'll like prune one side, the size of a stick, one side the size of the size of your arm, like the stick, one side the size of your thumb, and it's just a way to kind of let the grapes mature at a more rapid rate, and it helps as a pruning method just to ensure the longevity of the vines. So it's the pruning method that he uses. This is interesting. I had never had this grape varietal before. I've actually had 100% Graciano before from Rioja. There's a couple producers in Rioja and outside of Rioja that do make it, but never had it as Tintilla. And I don't know if anybody else had this wine. It's relatively a little bit newer to the market, but you're starting to find some restaurants starting to feature it, which is very exciting. And Ellen Bang from the Boston Globe actually just did a write-up on it last week, which was really cool. So in terms of tasting, what to expect here, right? And a different grape we've all not really gotten to experience. I was really personally blown away by the fact that this is like a Southern Spanish red wine that to me still has a lot of freshness, and the alcohol level is like pretty balanced. It's about 13.5. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. I was also really impressed too with the level of acidity in this wine, and just overall, just the really beautiful aromatics. For me, on the nose here, there's definitely more of those like kind of smoky elements, even sometimes too that like kind of charred meat mixed with like minerals, purple flowers, black and blue fruits, and definitely like really beautiful herbaceous undertones too. And on the palate too, once again, that high acidity and that minerality that comes through on the palate. And the tannins here are a little bit more mild, in my opinion, not super strong, but still present, which is wonderful. So I was really impressed with this. I don't know about how everybody else felt, but I thought it was really interesting. This wine is going to start to get us into a series of wines that have some really interesting oak treatments. Definitely in terms of a winemaker, Alberto Orte does tend to be a little bit more, I'd say like limited in terms of intervention in the vineyards, like a lot of hand harvesting, a lot of more traditional techniques, sustainable, if not organic viticulture. And he definitely dabbles in biodynamic farming as well, though nothing is technically certified. But what I think is interesting as we get through these red wines is the oak aging treatments, because each one goes through a kind of unique treatment, and it goes through a much more prolonged aging regimen than like what we've seen with some of the past wines I think we've experienced. So here with this Tintilla, he's used 19 months of aging, which is pretty substantial in my opinion. We have about 12 of those months being in oak casks, where we have, 40% oak and then 60% concrete. And then you have the remaining in smaller French oak barrels. So he's really kind of running the gamut here of some different techniques here. The concrete, once again, is going to be an alternative to stainless steel. Lets kind of the freshness shine through in that minerality. And then the 60% oak cask would be larger, like a larger oak barrel, which once again isn't meant to impart as much flavor as opposed to texture. But then he kind of wraps it up with these smaller, I think 225 liter oak barrels to end things up, which are going to give you some of those kind of warmer spices that come through. Definitely those like kind of clove, cinnamon stick spices. Definitely be a remnant here of the oak, if anything. But it's still balanced here too. As you start to kind of play around with some more hardier red grape varietals that have like a little bit more umph to it, it's where you can really start to play around with some of your aging regimens without kind of overpowering the natural characteristics of the grape varietal. But I was like very pleasantly surprised with this and really enjoyed it. And once again, personally, I felt like there was a lot of freshness here that I did not expect in a wine from this area, and an area that's not necessarily known for the still red wine production. And in terms of pairings too, I had put in like a chorizo, I think poached in like a red wine. But definitely in terms of charcuterie, this is your friend. But like a, paella too, I think could be really lovely here too. There's a lot of different options. It's super versatile. Had anybody tried this wine before or heard of it, just as a little poll? Yeah, it's always fun. I always like enjoy, I think one of the most fun things about wine is you're never going to know all of these grape varietals. There's so many to explore. And definitely when you get into Spain, France, Italy, it just gets a little wild and crazy with all of these indigenous grapes. So it's always so interesting. I'm such a fan of any winemaker that likes to kind of revive some of these like old school like indigenous grapes and find ways to bring them back and make them relevant. And I think that it just kind of showcases what Alberto Orte is all about in terms of his winemaking. So I'd love to hear if anybody enjoyed this wine, what they thought. Go for it.
We're enjoying it.
Yeah. At first I couldn't tell if maybe there was some carbonic or something going on when I first smelt it, and maybe like a touch of Brett, but not in a bad way. But I feel like it's blown off, and now I get a lot of spice. That you get on this. Like,
yeah, it definitely showcases the spice of life for sure.
Yeah, and even I'm getting into like literally cracked black pepper almost, at this point with it. But yeah, I mean, I don't get a lot of oak, even though it's seeing oak, but it doesn't, I don't think it's doing anything really to the fruit. But never heard of the grape before, obviously, until today. I've had Gratiano, but obviously not Tintilla. Yeah, so this is a pleasant surprise. I've seen a label before, out there, but this is pretty good. Yeah. I mean, it's so fun trying these, kind of way off the beaten path, Spanish wines. So really cool.
Oh, cool. Yeah. It's so interesting. I had mentioned I'd had a couple 100% Graziano wines before, but they were never like, they're entry-level wines that were not meant to be like super interesting. They were good, but I think that this is like interesting. Like it's actually like
very
more complex than the other two. I've only had 200% Graziano wines, but definitely more interesting. And it just like so fascinating because those came from like, once again, Rioja or right outside of Rioja. So I just, once again, was not expecting, all kind of the Southern Spanish wines I've had are usually kind of, they're powerful and intense. And like, whether it's like Garnacha or Monastrell, it's a lot, it packs a punch. So this was once again, a little bit of a nice surprise and reprieve. And yeah, I'm excited to share it with you guys and to really, before about last month or so, I hadn't tasted it before too. So I always love to be able to experience new things as well.
Chelsea, I really like this red. It's balanced and it just, I really love it. I had never heard of that grape either. So I went ahead and Googled it before we had the video.
Oh, cool.
Today. Well, I found two spellings, and I wonder if are they the same grape. I found that, and then there was one that it was spelled Tintilia.
There's another grape from Molise, like in Italy. So I don't know if it's that grape varietal. Does it say it's from Molise?
It said it was from the same region. So I was curious if there are two spellings, because I like this so much, I'll actually start looking for this grape in the future, but I didn't know if it was if they were the same vintage, or I'm sorry, same grape variety.
I'll look it up. I know when I was like doing some preliminary research on it, I know there was an Italian grape varietal with a like similar spelling, which confused me at first. But it also could be that there could be several different spellings for it. I mean, there's definitely there's so many grape varietals that have different pronunciations. Like we just did our Corsican box last month where there's different pronunciations and spellings for some of those varietals in different pockets. So it totally could be possible. I didn't find that myself, but that does not mean at all that it's not possible.
This is wonderful. I love the spice.
Yeah. And it's nice because it's also just not as full-bodied and powerful, but it still packs a good amount of flavor too, which is a really nice compromise, I'd say, which is really lovely. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it. That's fun.
Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts?
I've got one thing. Full disclosure, my Corvin is out of gas, so I'm not even tasting these tonight.
Great.
But I will soon. I can't drink 4 bottles on a Tuesday night. I'm just not as young as I used to be. But one thing that interests me is I'm enjoying the fact that Spanish winemakers are using more French oak than American oak. And for a long time, Spanish wine meant American oak because France and Spain never get along. But I'm going to enjoy this, that all three of your reds tonight use French oak, and one of them used some American, but they all use French. And I think that's a good thing for Spanish wine. It softens it a little bit on the whole, and I think it brings out a lot more of the subtle flavors in Spanish wine, whereas before it was much more the alcohol always and the sharp edge of the tannins always took away from the experience for me. And I'm enjoying Spanish wines a lot more now that more and more winemakers are using French oak.
I agree with that. So I'll just like make a quick note of that, like in the sense that like for me, for a long period of time, Spanish wine, like a lot of Spanish red wine, I felt like to make a powerful Spanish red wine, a lot of winemakers felt like they needed to use American oak, which does tend to be a little bit more powerful than French oak. And typically will be like, a better candidate for Cabernet Sauvignon, for Zinfandel, for grapes that kind of have more power and depth of flavor and usually higher tannin. I felt like for a long period of time, sometimes it could overpower, especially the Tempranillo based wines of Rioja, but you were definitely seeing it elsewhere too. And I think that a lot of Spanish wineries are really trying now to focus more on like the sense of place, the terroir, and like, the grape varietals themselves, as opposed to like more just intense, powerful, like oak aging. And that's like definitely very exciting to see because it's just creating, I think, some more wines of balance that are really interesting and really showcase like the quality that Spain has to offer, and not like hiding just behind, intense oak aging. Because when you don't have a balance in that, you just can't really taste the grape varietal, and it's not very distinguished, from any other region. So you always have to be balanced when you're using oak, except for if you're just coming out with a wine that's from nowhere in particular and you don't care. But these wines are all like, based off of a sense of place, and you can only experience that place if you can actually taste the grape. And so that balance is important. I agree. Shall we move on to a little Mencía? Let's do it. Okay. So we have 2015 Aportella Mencía coming from Valdores. So we're going back to kind of the northwestern corner of Spain. This is going to be the region of Valdores, which is one of the three main areas where you find Mencía production. So we had in our January Crubox focused on two Mencía wines, which were from Bierzo, which is one of probably the most quality. That and Ribera Sacra would be two of the most kind of well-known quality regions for Mencía. I'd say Valdores is like sometimes a little bit behind in the sense that it's actually more well-known for its white wine production than for its red wine production. Typically in those like three pockets in northwestern Spain, you'll find that like Mencía and then the white grape Godeo are your prominent grape varietals. But definitely when you get to Valdores, since it's a little bit of a cooler pocket, you do find more white production, which is Godeo, there as opposed to red. But what's interesting, once again, is this is another wine made by Alberto Orte. And he found a pocket within Valdores that he was really excited about called Aportella, which is a sub-district of Valdores. And what he found once he got there was this really awesome plot or single vineyard that was high elevation. We find that with Mencía, it's a grape varietal that grows pretty well in higher elevations. So this vineyard is anywhere from about 1,600 to 26 to 2,700 feet above sea level. So higher elevation vineyards. And then the soils here too are clay, granite, slate, and I think a little bit of silt as well. So I found an ideal plot here. We've talked about this grape before, but I always love to focus on it because it's a grape for me that I think is one of the like underdogs in terms of like really high quality Spanish grape varietals. And it's a grape that also for me can just be very different depending on the subregion, depending on the aging regimen. It can be young, like nuanced and fresh. And sometimes it can be definitely much more age-worthy, have like much more kind of savory undertones and like produce some pretty, you know, high strength, like more concentrated tannin wines that have real age-worthy potential. So this for me is definitely a little bit more of that like kind of cross in between. It has some of that like light fresh fruit, but at the same time also definitely is a wine that has some aging potential. It's already 6 years old to begin with. So as we start to go into two wines that have some more age, I always like recommend, it's interesting if you put that wine up against like a white background, if you have it. It's getting a little dark here as the sun's setting over here. But if you're still gonna put this against a white background, you might see that there's gonna be some of that rim variation too on the outside, where you'll see the color start to concentrate itself into the middle as a wine ages. And if you kind of compared it next to the Varay Polgar, which is 2017, this is 2015, and then compare it against the La Antigua Classica, it's definitely interesting to see as that wine ages, how that rim is going to be lighter and the color will start to concentrate more into the middle. So just kind of an interesting thing that's always kind of fun to keep in mind, because we're always sometimes so focused on the smell and the taste of the wine, but sometimes just by looking at it, we can get a lot of information, and that's really fun. For me, Mencia is like one of those grapes that can be sometimes like a little bit Pinot Noir-like, sometimes a little bit more Cabernet Franc-like. It just kind of can run the gamut. And what's interesting too is you can find with Alberto Ortiz Vineyards, he's sourcing from a lot of pretty old vines, like impressively old. So this is, I think, vines anywhere from 1976 to 1990 in terms of age. And once again, as we're working with some of these older vine vineyards, you're typically finding that like there's going to be less yields here per hectare. So really focus on smaller quality production. All of the wines that we focus on tonight are under, I think, 2,000 cases produced. So this is pretty artisanal here in terms of small case production. And then you'll also find too that as these vines kind of keep on aging, the grapes will that are on the vine are going to lessen in terms of the yield per vine, but the quality can usually remain pretty high because the grapes that have stayed there have kind of stayed the test of time and have a little bit more strength. They have a little bit more tannin, a little bit more structure to kind of go forward. So they make some really interesting wines. For me, I find that Mencia is always like a little bit more of a red fruit like focused wine. When I opened this up, I gave it a little time to breathe. I always find that sometimes there's more tannin here than I always expect. So I gave it a little time to decant after opening it, but I found this like really beautiful, almost like wild strawberry, almost like a balsamic, like wild strawberry too, that like came through at first. That was really exciting. And then always cherry, which is like, you know, kind of ever present with Mencia, and even like a little bit of like pomegranate too, which was interesting. As I like started to sip it, the cherry came through again, but in a much more like bitter way. And then definitely a lot of kind of spices, herbs, floral qualities came through. This wine has some like pretty serious structure to it. You know, once again, it is like not at all, you know, just something that you might want to sip on and just like not eat with. I personally would really enjoy food here. And in terms of pairings too, for me, I always love to do Mencia with like mushroom-based dishes. I think sometimes with the savory elements here, that can always be very nice, but definitely with meat here, like this can do really well. I mean, whether you're doing, you know, lighter like beef preparations, pork, there's a lot of options here, or even to a chicken dish with like a stronger sauce could possibly work too. But definitely interesting. For those who had the Bierzo Mencias of January, this is definitely very interesting, kind of stronger flavors and aromas, not as much kind of more delicate aromatics, but really kind of showcases too that Valdoris, even though it's a little more known for Godeo, can make some pretty serious badass Mencia as well. And this is, once again, 6 years old. I think it can easily go for another 5 years, but maybe even more. I mean, Mencia does have age-worthy capabilities. It's really not something that we see, though, you know, a lot in terms of some back vintages on a lot of restaurant wine lists, but maybe that will change. I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts and feedback.
Yeah, Chelsea, you said something that at first I thought, well, this is just my unsophisticated palate
Never.
speaking. But you mentioned Pinot Noir, and as I was tasting this, it reminded me of the Willamette Valley Pinot
Yeah.
we had times ago. There's a little bit of a tartness there. The
Yeah.
color and consistency is different, but it really did remind me of a Willamette Valley Pinot. And I don't always like a Willamette Valley Pinot, but the one that you specifically had sampled, I really loved, and this reminds me of that.
So that was Yves Duplain Seven Springs Pinot Noir. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I do definitely think that like Mencia can have Pinot like qualities in terms of some of like, especially too, since Pinot's usually like more of a red fruit like focused grape, and Mencia can have those qualities too. And since this is higher elevation, we have some like good structure and acidity. I definitely see those like comparisons. So definitely you're really right on track. I love it. I'm super impressed.
Yeah, Chelsea, it's Millie. Sorry, I'm folding laundry, so I'm not on video. I was really excited when I smelled it. I was super excited to taste it, and I was like, oh, I was a little disappointed. But then you noted like opening it up and letting it decant. Just even in the last like 5 minutes, I can tell a difference. So this is really nice. It is. It's a nice wine.
Yeah, I've noticed with Mencia, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, especially for some like higher quality options, for it to like really open up and like do its thing. So I know I've had a couple moments too where I like opened something like this right off the bat, and I was just kind of like, okay. But then like, you know, got into it a little bit later, and it's really like, I mean, I've had it open for about an hour and a half now, so it's still doing its thing, which is really exciting. So good thing to know.
Chelsea, we are enjoying this with duck breast.
Oh, nice.
It's
awesome.
a perfect combination.
Yes, with it, like, and that's the interesting thing too. Like, red Burgundy obviously is a good pairing with duck here, and this is where those like kind of comparisons can also play, come into play. Definitely with game here, I think this is a great option with those like savory undertones. That makes me happy. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really extremely structured wine. I agree with you that you could just sip it by itself, but it's very nice, you know, paired with a gamier meat. I think, you know, because it actually, it's a nice complement in a way to, you know, I mean, we did it with a spice rub and a pomegranate molasses reduction just to get a little sweetness into it. Yeah, I mean, it's not a French wine, but it has that same, you know, kind of power to it. You know, it's definitely not French.
I think too, maybe it's also like the fact that it's, you know, it's representing a sense of place, and that's like what we think of when we think about French wine. And that's like why I'm like very excited about the direction that a lot of like Spanish wineries are going towards, is like, you know, doing those things that they can to like not overshadow the place for
sure. Yeah, doing what they do best.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that. That's cool. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, you kind of hit the head on the, it was all like red fruit, you know, on the nose when I first kind of got into it, like cranberries jumping out of glass.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting like that spice after smelling it that you get on the palate, because it's got a lot of spice. And you were talking about Mencia. Molly and I, we had a 20-year-old Mencia, Jose Palacios, who had his Corlon that you taught, you know, and found it at a shop in I can't even remember the town.
Was that when you were in Spain?
No, this was here. Opened 20. It was a 21-year-old. It's 2000 vintage of Palacios, the Corlon.
Palacios Corlon is like one of the Palacios wines that we featured in our January Crubox. So that's that's very cool. Those wines are like, they're delicious. They're
stumbled upon it, and I was like,
cool, what a fun find.
You know, I'm gonna take a little risk here. Hopefully they stored it well, and it was fantastic. So
it's always exciting when that pays off. It's a great feeling. That's awesome. Okay, cool. I'll get into
Chelsea, I've had this wine several times in the past, and I find it more Southern Rhône than Burgundy, and I think I prefer Mencia to have those Burgundian profile, taste profile, and texture. And I just find this one to be much closer to Southern Rhone. And I've had a tasting with it, and I put it up against Southern Rhone, and it went over well. It's the spiciness in it takes me away from Burgundy and puts me in the Rhone, and that's what it's just a different Mencia, and that's what I like about the sense of place. You know, Mencia can be anything from Willamette Valley to Burgundy to Southern Rhone, and it's really cool that you can get that many different flavors from a grape. And you know, so when people say to me, I don't like Mencia, well, I can give you 3 of them, and I'm sure you're going to love one of them. You know, they're so different, and so I enjoy this wine a lot. But I typically will drink it if I'm in the mood for a Rhone, and I just don't feel like a Rhone. You know, don't feel like opening a Rhone. I'll open this.
I see what you're saying with that, especially with this example too, because it has like much more of that rusticity that you'd expect out of like a Southern Rhone Garnacha or Garnacha or Grenache, I guess, say if we're in the Southern Rhone. But it's so interesting because like I felt like with the Jose Palacios wines from January, those were a little bit more in that Burgundy Pinot Noir like elegance, whereas this has definitely those kind of rustic undertones. So I like that comparison. I think that's great. Awesome. Well, we'll get into our next wine. I realize I've kind of gone on about the other ones a little too long, so my apologies for getting very excited about being reinvigorated about Spain. But our last wine is the 2010 La Antigua Clásico Rioja Reserva, which is coming, of course, from the Rioja region, kind of north central Spain. This is another Alberto Orte selection, one of kind of the first selections that he worked on with Patrick Mata. And I think it really showcases once again to kind of a more old school style of Rioja. So Rioja, while they can make white, rosé, sparkling, overall known, of course, as red wine production central and known for their blends, you can kind of think about them as like the Bordeaux of Spain in a sense, even though they're not coastally located. And I'm sure many Bordeaux lovers would find them different. But you'll find here that you have 3 main subregions of the Rioja region. You have the Rioja Alta, which is going to be to the left. In the middle, you have the Rioja Alavesa, and then to the right, you have the Rioja Oriental. So these 3 regions kind of comprise the bulk of Rioja production. And what Rioja was kind of known for a long period of time was their classification of aging, which would start with their Crianza, your Reserva, your Gran Reserva, and work your way up. And it was really focused on like the level of aging that like a producer would require to put out a wine. Whereas I'd say like in the last like 5 or so years, I think they've made some changes now where a lot of Rioja producers now are focused a little bit more on like the sub-region of Rioja, or even some of the single vineyard plots, as there's, I think, around 150 or so different single vineyard sites within Rioja. So it's really exciting once again to see some of these winemakers focused a little bit more on terroir. This was an area for a long period of time where they were focused on a lot of like prominent oak aging with newer barrels of American and French oak. And Rioja is classically known for their red wine production as being typically a blend. Tempranillo tends to be the star, though it is not in this case, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Garnacha comes a second, always typically second. And then Graciano is usually the third blending varietal that they'll use, which is the same as Tintilla, which we had earlier. And then Mazuelo sometimes can be used too as a blending varietal as well. And you can find a couple others too that they'll mix into the blend, though Tempranillo and Garnacha are usually the backbones. Tempranillo, once again, is there for the structure. It provides like the inherent structure to the wine. Garnacha is always known for this amazing kind of spicy red fruit and beautiful like elegance in terms of its backbone. It doesn't have naturally as high levels of acidity, so it can develop higher levels of alcohol. So Tempranillo can help kind of anchor it. And then Graciano has always been known for like adding some beautiful aromatics to the blend. Alberto Orte, being the adventurer that he is, decided to find this like plot within the Rioja Alta region, which is that region to the left, which is actually tends to be the highest quality region of all the 3 subregions of Rioja. And the reason being just because it is higher elevation. A lot of Rioja production does happen on the valley floor. But as we've talked about previously, it's usually those higher elevation vineyards that can get you some of the most quality grape varietals. So he found a very forgotten area within the Rioja Alta called Sierra de la Demanda, where he basically has to farm and ham harvest up in these high elevation zones. He's farming vines from the 1940s. So we're getting older here for sure. And the elevation here is around 2,300 feet above sea level. So higher elevation vineyard sites. And actually he has, I think he harvests one of the last producers to harvest in all of Western Europe. So we talked about some longer hang time with the Lirana Albarino. This is definitely getting a little extreme. And because of this too, he's pretty small case production here, only a couple thousand cases, because it's just so hard to kind of work with some of these vines, and it's all hand harvested and wild stuff. We have here 60% Garnacha, 30% Tempranillo, and then the remaining 10% Graciano. And why he wanted to work with Garnacha is because he wanted to kind of harken back to some of the older school ways of Rioja production, which did tend to sometimes favor a little bit more Garnacha than Graciano, which makes this overall, I'd say, a little bit of a lighter style of Rioja, not as powerful as some can be that have the Tempranillo backbone, but definitely you get the aging here. So you have your 72 months of aging. Reservas have to have 3 years minimum aging requirements, 1 year in barrel, and then I think about 6 months in bottle. And here we have 60% French oak and 40% American oak here used. So as we taste it together, once again, the rim variation's coming on much stronger here. This is an 11-year-old wine, but it still has plenty of time to age here. Definitely in terms of tasting, the Garnacha always brings for me like these beautiful ripe red fruits, more of that like cherry, that like really beautiful raspberry that comes through, like a more kind of juicy but herbal dried raspberry. A little like pipe tobacco on the nose here. And more of that like bitter cherry on the palate. You definitely get from the oak aging here those notes of like kind of spice, like vanilla, those like dried floral qualities, and like almost like a little bit of that like hint of dill, which you could sometimes get from the American oak, and a little bit of that like kind of toasted coconut too, but like a little smoky. This is a cool wine, and it's once again a little bit more understated for Rioja, but at the same time shows the potential for aging here, and kind of showcases too that a lot of these kind of quality producers are holding their wines longer. So you can enjoy a wine that's available now that has 11 years of age on it, which I think is cool. We're always trying to try wines that have some age and like to understand what that's all about once wine has gone through its evolution of aging. So Rioja can sometimes be a really great opportunity to approach something that already has a substantial amount of age on it right now, but also has the potential to move forward and age longer. I think this could easily age another 10 years. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts. I realize we're kind of running over a little bit too, so I want to be sensitive to people's time. But would love to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to turn on the light too, because it's getting dark out. So hold on one sec. So much better. Awesome. Any thoughts, feedback on the Rioja?
I've got a few things as usual. Number one, I think this is the perfect midweek Rioja. When you don't want to, you just want a Rioja on a Tuesday night, this is a perfect one to have. I usually have some around. I love this wine. It's fun. It's drinkable. It's a lot of fun. But one thing I want to bring up, there are tens of millions of wine drinkers in the world, hundreds of millions maybe. And tonight's 4 bottles, you've got a total under 7,000 cases produced. So few people are drinking these wines in comparison, and you're sharing these with us. First of all, I want to thank you because you can't get these wines anywhere. There's only 7,000 cases total produced for the world. And I really appreciate how many times you give us, you get us wines that that not many people get to taste. I think that's really cool.
I feel like you're my cheerleader, Wade, and I really appreciate it. Honestly, like when we started Crubox, it was really about like being able to like bring really interesting quality wines to people in a wine club. And like part of that, I think, is like showing you some of these smaller production, like, you know, more artisanal options that are out there. And like, luckily with Gordon's, we're able to source a lot of things that like sometimes, well, we have some good relationships. We're started in 1934. So we've been working on them for a long time. And it just like, you know, once again, just gets us access to some things that not everybody gets access to, but we just want to, you know, share that with everybody. And I think it's really important to be able to showcase some of these smaller producers because they're like putting so much hard work and effort into what they're doing. There's so much passion and it really comes through in the wines. And it's really something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm glad you are too. And I think people who are enjoying Crubox too are enjoying it because of the fact that they're getting, you know, some really high quality selections and getting turned on to things that they might not have tried before. So that makes me happy. You made me smile. I'm maybe even blushing just a bit. It could be the wine, but it could be the wonderful compliment. Awesome.
Well, I drink a lot of Rioja myself, and one thing about Rioja that it's interesting, kind of like what Wayne is saying, that people aren't trying these wines because it's still amazing to me the value that you can be drinking 10-year-old wine for a very reasonable price. When people spend a lot of money on Cabernet from California that is way too young to drink at the same time. So it just kind of goes to show Spain, the value in Spain, I think, is tremendous. You know, that's the one advantage we have right now, is that it hasn't maybe caught on too much. So the wines have stayed, you know, extremely reasonably priced, you know, because, you know, let's face it, Burgundy in certain areas are just getting very expensive, and hard, you know, just hard to drink every night. But great wines tonight. This great Rioja. I mean, classic coconut dill on the nose, but not over the top, you know.
Yeah, well, it's well integrated, and I think too, as it like continues to age, like it'll, you know, still I feel like needs a little more time to just like have everything fully integrate, but I think it's on its way, which is great.
Do they make a Grand Reserva? Because obviously this would pass, you know, with the amount of age they're doing, but they do make one as well, or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
They do, and he makes a white too, like a white Rioja, which is really lovely as well.
Yeah,
very cool.
Like little like Lopez already, they will age their wines obviously well over what, you know, all their wine class qualify for Grand Reserva, but they don't put it on, you know, obviously on the label. But so it sounds like they're doing a little bit of that too, you know, especially with the amount of time it spends in oak. So it's really cool.
For sure.
Mr. Ford, you can get all 3 of those, the white, the Reserva, and this one at Gordon's. And if you haven't had them, I recommend getting all 3 and trying them. They're a lot of fun.
It's fun to play around. White Rioja is definitely like when made well, it's a real joy. It's really interesting and definitely hard to come by, but very good. For sure. Well, you guys, this has been so much fun. It's always just like such a pleasure being with you all. I know I probably kept you over just a little bit, so I apologize for that. But definitely, we have some very exciting things coming up for June. I'll be sending out an email early next week about June's Crubox. I'm not going to tell you what we're doing. I'm going to make it a surprise because it's going to be great. I'm very excited about very seasonal wines that will be perfect for June. And I also too will say I'm going to stick around here. So if anybody wants to stay on, if you have any questions that you didn't get answered or just want to chat, I'm here. And also too, if you like any of these wines too, I'll put them up on our website on Crubox at the past Crubox wines tomorrow, just so you can have access to them and see pricing too. But obviously happy to answer any questions. And as always, it's just so much fun being with you all. And I hope you enjoyed the wines and enjoyed the experience. And thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
Great job.
So fun.
Muchas gracias.
Next
Thank
time,
you. Thank you.
next time I want to eat dinner at Faith's house. Sign me up for doing at your place.
Yeah.
Maybe soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Of course. Of course. It was so much fun. I'm so glad you guys were able to make it. And thank you for coming a little earlier.
Oh, that's good. I'm in a meeting right now, reviewing compliance letters.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you. No,
good.
it's so much fun having you. And I'll see you soon. I look forward to it. It's gonna
Yes.
be fun.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys, for coming.
Chelsea, can I get a recording of this? Because I didn't drink it tonight, and I'm probably going to open it with, I'm going to open them with friends, and
Yeah.
I'd like to go through the program again.